friends had been sending me a few links of some informative BBC archived short films, lasting anywhere from 1 to 3 minutes on Facebook. I thoroughly enjoyed watching them, so I started trying to find more and more, and soon realised that it wasn't simply a case of sitting down and enjoying continuous viewing, as at the end of each short film you have to go and search for another one. So I have put together some clips for each era, so that you can continuously enjoy them all on any device that you may be using, including of course the best way, on your large TV. I'm starting from 1948 and will finish in 1960, so there will be a few editions available. For those of you like me who enjoy a bit of nostalgia now and again, enjoy.
On Tuesday, the restrictions on meals in restaurants were lifted. The 5-shilling maximum, for instance, no longer applies, nor does the 3-course limit. The Food Minister has said that he is trying this experiment to help the catering industry and the tourist trade, feeling, to quote his own words, that this restriction no longer has any substantial merit as an instrument of equity in the consumption of food supplies. This is what London Soho had to say about it.
Yes, I am very glad with this new decision. It will give us an opportunity to bring back the art of cooking. A great thing indeed.
I think it's a very good idea to have abolished the 5 shillings limit. Now the clients will have a much better variety of foods.
The one snag to my mind is the abolition of the service charge, because while wanting to keep our prices at the same level, we still have to meet the extra costs of the Catering Wages Act.
I'm very glad to say that the 5-shilling limit on meals has been removed, and at last I can really enjoy a meal with as many courses as I like.
Well, I don't think it's going to affect me at all, as I only pay 1 and 9pence for a meal any day. The only thing I'm worried about is as long as I can still get my meal for 1 and 9pence, and I don't increase the charge on that.
Fashions made news twice this week. The items in the headlines were those essential accessories, shoes and hats. First to Olympia for the annual Shoe and Leather Fair, and to report on it comes Marjorie Anderson.
According to the exhibitors, women are more shoe conscious today than ever before. The result is many new and eye-catching novelty lines. The aim is to be different, and here, for example, is a silver kid and brocade evening shoe. Though simplicity is to be the keynote, the platform shoe is, of course, still in. This is a gold suede sandal with twin platform and a so-called Spanish heel. Flat-soled casuals like these will, according to the manufacturers, form part of every woman's wardrobe by next spring. Though colours are rather subdued, they brighten up in the slippers class. This one is in wine, with rayon lining and leather sole. A novelty, too, are these Bedouin slippers in ice blue.
From shoes to hats is never a great step. This time it took the cameras across London to a part of the capital where caps are said to be more fashionable, Wapping. The setting was what's proudly called the oldest riverside inn in London, the Prospect of Whitby.
Yes, for a few hours it was turned into a fashion salon, with its terrace forming the background for one of Mayfair's first autumn hat shows. Femininity was the vogue, with black and white the two dominating colours. Although the large brim was much in evidence, it was a small, close-fitting hat with feather trimming that indicated what will be worn this autumn. Among the unofficial onlookers at this open-air show was that celebrated waterman, author and dramatist, Sir Alan Herbert. Paradise feathers trim this rust velour evening hat, while white Spanish baubles form the relief on this grey hatter's plush bonnet. More baubles for another plush hat, again in white. There is something special about the color, so the designer told me, for this is the new shade of peppermint white. Even inside the saloon, the salon's accent was still on white, the color that is planned to be it in the autumn hat parade.
Calais, starting point for many a channel crossing, was the setting for another this week. This time it was by television. From Calais' Hotel de Ville came the first program televised direct from the continent. Here in the Place de Ville, Peter Dimmock, assistant head of television outside broadcasts, is discussing details of the historic program with Jean Berger of Radiodiffusion Française and Lita Frekal, the star of the show. On the tower of the Hotel de Ville, a microwave transmitter had been set up. Below lay the story the outside broadcast cameras were later to tell, but up here was the first link in the chain to British viewers. The Calais-Dover link was at first a problem, but during tests it was found that the signal received at Dover fluctuated with the weather, the tides, and even with shipping. After several trials, a receiving position was fixed on one of the towers at the Air Ministry radar station at Swingate, high above Dover. The microwave link works on a wavelength of a few centimeters and concentrates the radio energy into a sharp beam, rather like that of a searchlight. The object is to concentrate the maximum amount of energy towards the next receiving point, which in Dover's case was at Lenham. At Lenham, 26 miles away, similar equipment was set up on top of a water tower, and from here the signal was retransmitted in the VHF, very high frequency waveband. Stage number 3 was from Lenham to Harwell near Rootham, a distance of 18 miles. Here again the equipment was on top of a water tower. From Harwell to London made the final lap. Thus, a total distance of 95 miles was hopped in 4 stages. The Senate House of London University and its 200-foot-high roof served as a receiving station in London. From here, the signals went by cable via Broadcasting House to Alexandra Palace and by the GPO radio link system to Sutton Coldfield. That's how these pictures came to viewers on Sunday, as Calais was en fête for this historic day, when the centenary of the first cross-channel telegraph was celebrated by the first cross-channel television broadcast.
Backstage, the periodical with the world's biggest sale. That's the heading to a story that goes behind the pages of the Radio Times. In the office of the editor, Tom Henn, is the heart of an organization that each week keeps more than 8 million homes up to date on their listening and viewing. When our cameras called last week, the Christmas issue was being made up, and a photograph of the King making his traditional Christmas broadcast will have a prominent place in it, as Radio Times readers will find out for themselves next Friday. That's the regular publishing date of this Journal of the BBC, a journal that has been making a weekly appearance ever since 1923. Much of its makeup is thrashed out in the art editor's office. Here, pictures and illustrations to go with program billings are decided upon and then prepared to be made into blocks. The term each picture assumes once it has been engraved. All this, plus all the printed matter, is mapped out in a dummy page, and it's to the dummy that artists, caption writers, sub-editors and printers all work. This is to be the front cover of the Christmas issue, drawn for this occasion by Walter Hodges. It will be reproduced on more than 8 million copies by means of this line block. One of the last planning stages before each issue goes for printing takes place in the sub-editor's office. For with the paste up, the paper is put to bed, as the newspaper men call it. A complete copy made up from rough proofs is prepared here for the guidance of the man on the stone, the man who supervises its going to press. From the sub-editors, the copy goes to the comps, the compositors who set it all by hand. Once it's all set, a chase or metal frame is placed round the type to bind it together. A final check with the make-up page, and then a papier-mâché mold is taken. It's from this that the actual printing plates will be cast. From the foundry, the plates, ready curved, go off to the rotary presses. These speedy giants churn out more than 20,000 copies an hour. To the outside observer, probably the most fascinating part behind a paper's appearance. With the large rolls stripped and cut up, the end of the journey is near. Ahead now lies counting, sorting and dispatch. But as far as the printing presses are concerned, another weekly miracle has been accomplished. Another issue of the Radio Times is out, in spite of the last-minute difficulties that always make it seem that this time it'll be late. With the television and 7 regional editions to handle, the dispatch department faces a mammoth task. Though their area stretches from Land's End to John O'Groats, it's an exception when a Friday goes by without millions of homes taking their first look at next week's copy of the Radio Times. Television takes to the air. From Filton Airfield near Bristol, outside broadcasts have been experimenting throughout the week with television broadcasting from the air. The means for it all were to be found in one of the famous Bristol freighter transports, specially fitted up for the occasion by the makers of the Brabazon, the Bristol Aeroplane Company. In the plane, its interior so huge that it can carry 2 motor cars, was fitted up a television camera, plus all the special equipment needed for an outside broadcast. To operate came television cameraman Duncan Anderson. After being fitted out in flying kit, he took up his position near the open doorless hatch where the camera had been mounted. Everything seemed set for another page of television history. But throughout a week of test flights, the flying television crews were faced by difficulties that threatened the outcome of the proposed programs. Thanks to non-stop work by the engineers, all the problems have apparently been solved. But it was not until Friday that one of the most difficult,
interference on the wave band used by the airborne television transmitter was overcome. This is the view of London, which the engineers thus hoped to show. It was from North Weald that, thanks to the RAF, further experimental flights were made this week. The latest reports suggested every prospect of success. On the outskirts of London, at Teddington, stands the National Physical Laboratory. Its newest achievement is the ACE, and though it sounds like the brainchild of a fiction writer, it is in fact the protege of a group of mathematicians. The name comes from its initials, Automatic Computing Engine. At present still in the pilot model stage, it was put into action this week. Its details are truly astonishing. It consists of 800 valves. Its running costs are about £1 a minute, but in that time, it can work out more sums than a hand-cranked machine could do in a month. For example, to find whether 999997 is a prime number, that is, whether any number divides into it, one takes just a set of cards, feeds them into the machine, and within a few seconds, the answer comes up. What would normally take about 500 division sums is now solved by tapping the problem number onto a series of keys. The specially perforated cards have told the machine what sort of problem it is, and now it's up to the ACE to give the answer. More complicated questions need more cards. To answer a problem dealing with the rays of light passing through a lens, 24 cards are required. These convey instructions in the form of punch holes which set off trains of electric pulses. These are distributed and stored in the machine's memory loop. The pulses indicate the figure 1, the gaps the figure 0. For all calculations are done with these two figures only, in what is known as the binary scale. As it begins its calculations, the results are passed back, punched into another set of holes according to the impulses received, and then translated into ordinary printed numerals. And the answer comes out first in card form and then on a roll of paper. Human brains would take about 6 months to solve the same problem. To engineers and scientists in all branches of industry, the electronic brain, as some persist in calling it, will be an invaluable aid. Months of work will be reduced to minutes, thanks to the ACE. Behind the pint of milk delivered each morning to 1 million doorsteps is a story that begins out in the country and nears its end somewhere around here in the bottling plant. If this plant was operated for 4 working days on end, it would bottle 30,000 gallons. And that figure, 30,000 gallons, has just set up a new world record. For that's the milk yielded so far by one Frisian cow during her 13 years on an Oxfordshire farm. There in a sunlit field, the new world champion this week received the press. After a morning spent the way cows always do, the record breaker turned in with the rest of the herd for milking at 2 o'clock. Placidly unaware that she was about to bring Britain another world championship, Manningford Faith Jan Graceful entered her private box, all ready for some special attention from the hands of the head cowman. And by yielding her midday milk, just as she had done for the last 12 years, Graceful brought her grand total to more than £250,000, beating by 11 pounds the record held up to now by an American Frisian. There hasn't been a day when Graceful didn't yield at least 70 pounds. On top of that, she has mothered 9 calves, the youngest born only 4 months ago. When all the milk yielded by Graceful during her lifetime is added up, this is what it would amount to. 9 wagons like this, each one holding almost 14 tons,
and making up a milk train all by themselves. 119 tons of milk. And if Graceful's total yield, as held in these tankers, were translated into pints of milk, it would put a bottle on 240,000 doorsteps, sufficient to supply a one-pint family for more than 300 years. The scene in London's Baker Street earlier this week had all the makings of a first-class mystery. Outwardly, things were much as they always were. But by achieving a carefully timed entrance into a certain house in Baker Street, one found number 221B, and the answer to all the mystery. For here, at his address, Sherlock Holmes had come back. The man who became a legend already during his fictional life was resurrected by the Mayor of Marylebone, here to open the Sherlock Holmes exhibition. There too was Mr. Dennis Conan Doyle on the left, son of the author who created Holmes, and Mr. Arthur Wantner, the actor who brought Holmes to life in several films. Though all that is known of Sherlock Holmes comes from the memoirs of his friend Dr. Watson, the great detective still is very much alive to thousands. To millions of future readers, his activities in the Baker Street of the 1890s will always be a source of unending enjoyment. A mountain of Holmesiana has by now been built around his character, a character that sprang to life in the Valley of Fear, Sherlock Holmes's first case. This is the study in which the private consulting detective received his clients, the room in which so many a mystery began. It has been recreated with such attention to detail that even Holmes himself could not have bettered the great detective work involved in translating legend into reality. Everything is in its proper place. There, in one corner of the room, is the violin, the Stradivarius which formed one of Holmes's recreations. And just above it, on the mantelpiece, there are the better-known accessories of his work. The pipe and the pipe rack, for example, with the Persian slipper holding tobacco just below. In his desk, there are the more serious parts of his work, the parts that made him the greatest detective of any age. It seemed that Holmes himself could not be far away. A partly full cup of tea, a half-finished piece of toast provided the clues. It was so true to life, in fact, that Holmes had to join in. His creator, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, tried to kill the great detective once, but public demand insisted on the return of Sherlock Holmes. Now he has returned again for the festival's duration, crowding Baker Street with the memoirs of Sherlock Holmes. From kitchen front to shop front, that was the battle plan for thousands of housewives in Britain this week. For this is sales week, and to report what the bargain hunters found is Marjorie Anderson.
Men's hosiery and underwear were somewhat naturally among the first bargains spotted by our cameramen, and I rather envied them. For in the men's line, prices were cut by half, while in the women's department, reductions weren't nearly as big. Women came more into their own in the dress section. Here, for example, were model and utility dresses where the £6 price range was cut to 70 shillings. And when the big day came, Mrs. and Miss Britain turned out in force. And somewhere among them all, there were some males too.
At one West End store, prospective women buyers had queued from one year to the next, having taken up their posts on New Year's Eve in readiness for the assault. As it turned out, most of the articles sold were made of aluminium, a metal that is not on the banned list. The real shortage, says the Board of Trade, is particularly in zinc, but many articles made of copper or brass as well will be prohibited from next month.
And with the first sales day nearly over, our cameras went out to hear the verdict from the salespeople.
The sale price of this shoe is 30 shillings. And speaking as a shoe salesman, I don't think that we will be able to offer this price again for several years.
I'm an assistant in the household linens, and after a really busy day, in fact it's been absolutely hectic, I'm now packing parcels after the shop is closed. I myself served about 250 customers, but this doesn't mean to say that there's been any panic buying. People have bought moderately, but there have been many more people buying.
The story was the same in most stores. Prices were going up, said the shopkeepers, so this was the time to buy.
I am the furnishing fabric buyer of a West End store, and we've just closed the store after one of the busiest day's sales we have had in a long, long time. And this has been in spite of the almost Arctic weather conditions that have prevailed outside. And while for a moment I do not suggest that every housewife should engage in a mild form of stockpiling, I do most sincerely say that if there is anything that she may be requiring in the future in the way of household textiles, whether they be curtains, carpets, sheets and blankets, and if of course she has the money at her disposal, let her buy them now. I do assure her it will be money well spent.
Well, I'm an average housewife, and I think that most of us feel that these sales are very useful, if not absolutely essential, with the rising cost of living, and we have much less money to go around nowadays. We do get one or two bargains, and even if it's only a few shillings or even coppers saved, we're very glad of that. And I know I've got one or two bargains here, and I think that I've had quite a good day, and I'm going home quite pleased with myself.
The first rush was over, and as the bargain hunters made their way homewards, January's sales became January's snows. For while prices had thawed, the freeze-up had been renewed all over again in the weather line. It brought with it some of the heaviest snow we have seen since that grim winter 4 years ago. Christmas comes but once a year, and when it comes it brings good cheer and a well-earned rest for almost everyone. To thousands of shop assistants, for example, the Christmas Eve dust sheets wore a festive air as they prepared to clock out for the Christmas holidays. But the flood of business which each year reaches its peak on Christmas Eve left its silt of cardboard boxes, fancy wrapping paper and bits of string to be swept up by the cleaning staffs before the shop could finally be shut. And on Christmas Day, St. Paul's Cathedral represented on a large scale a scene that was taking place in parish churches throughout the country as the people came in to attend the Christmas services. In London's far north, intrepid swimmers weakened on Christmas Day and warmed the Hampstead swimming pool before preparing to dive in. Everyone pretended they were having a grand time in the sunny south for the holidays. The spectators managed to keep quite warm in the excitement of a swimming race, and the hardy competitors seemed happy to take part in an annual Christmas sporting event with the water at 41 degrees. The Whitestone Pond at Hampstead did not freeze over this year, and instead of skaters was reserved for dogs. At Brookman's Park, cyclists from a number of clubs met on Christmas Day, as every year, to take part in a fancy dress rally, and the turnout was once again well up to standard. A tradition also is the rendezvous for coffee and cakes at the same cafe each year. And on Boxing Day, with the circus as a prime favourite, the people went out in search of entertainment. There were practically no empty seats to be found anywhere as the people of Britain went gay. Christmas, a time for greetings. Up and down Britain, millions of cards, thousands of letters, hundreds of parcels reach their destinations on time. And as postmen relax today for the first time in weeks, let's recall how some of the mail got there. Not city mail, but mail for out-of-the-way places, like this radio station on a cliff top at Holyhead. Here the postman was also Santa Claus, for it was to be a Christmas on duty for the wireless operators who keep Anglesey and Britain in touch with the Isle of Man. And right across Britain, on the east coast, the postman had his problems too. For here, on the Northumberland coast, the postman must also be something of an old salt, able to choose the tides that will allow him and his car to cross the sands to Holy Island. Holy Island, often known as the cradle of Christianity in England, is linked with the mainland for only 4 hours a day. During that time, driver John Mole must navigate his ancient and somewhat rusty car from near Berwick-on-Tweed to the tiny post office on the island. And there the Christmas mail was taken over by Mrs. Louisa Kyle, who is both postmistress and postwoman. The castle that dominates Holy Island is the most out-of-the-way point in Mrs. Kyle's round. To deliver her letters to this fortress of 4 centuries ago, she must climb nearly 200 feet. Thanks to Mrs. Kyle, the castle's lone inhabitants, Mr. and Mrs. Lilburn, receive their Christmas greetings. And there's no extra charge for a rather special delivery. Special too is the postman in the Scottish Highlands. Take the Corryhally route, north of Inverness. Here, Tommy the horse carries the mail for Jimmy Grant the postman. Twice a week, Christmas or not, the 6-footed postman completes 27 miles on a round that calls at only 2 houses. And by bringing Christmas mail to Farmer MacDonald and his neighbour 10 miles away, Mr. Grant is a postman in a million. For in addition to his pay, he receives a weekly allowance of 25 shillings for Tommy. Further south in the Highlands, Christmas deliveries took to the water. On Loch Afric in Inverness-shire, a postal run normally used only in the summer was brought back again just for Christmas week. It was up to postman-turned-boatman Duncan McLennan to get the mail through. Ahead of him lay a 4-mile-long trip to the other end of the loch. It took him through some of the most beautiful scenery in Scotland, all of it designated as a national park. And the recipient of Mr. McLennan's special delivery was another McLennan, Donald. He lives at this eastern end of the loch, an area that during the winter is often completely cut off. Waterborne too with his Christmas deliveries was a postman south of the border. He was Bill Mortram, whose round took him from Welney in Cambridgeshire through Fenland. Usually it's a dry land route, but last week was just one of the many occasions when Mr. Mortram took to a boat on the Bedford River. That way he could get his Christmas mail delivered in almost half the time. While the floating postman of the Fens completed his Christmas round, another postman was making his deliveries to those afloat further north. He was John Mully, one of Britain's few regular river postmen. For 36 years he has taken the mail around South Shields Harbour, calling on all ships that dock on Tyneside. Included in his round last week was the crew of a Canadian timber ship. To them, Mr. Mully was the Christmas link with home. Back to the west coast, the coast of Wales, for the last item in this roundup of the Christmas post in remote places. The address is South Stack Lighthouse, and from there the men of Trinity House watch over the shipping off this wild west coast. Up to the last war, the Holyhead postman made a weekly call at the lighthouse, climbing down 402 steps to get there. But today the mail is delivered by the Trinity House men themselves, and the journey hasn't shortened. It's still 402 steps. With the post for South Stack last week, there also came relief. The changeover meant Christmas ashore for one, Christmas at sea for the others. And with the mail having got through, it became a belated Christmas of rest for postmen all over the country. "76 hours to Christmas Day, and Oslo's traditional gift to London makes its mark in Trafalgar Square. For the 5th year in succession, a Christmas tree goes up in the centre of the capital. A Christmas greeting from the city of Oslo to the people of London. Coming from the Maridalen woods just outside the Norwegian capital, the tree brings with it everything but the snow. And this year, it links more than just London and Oslo, for the Norwegians have sent a similar tree to both Rotterdam and Reykjavik, the capital of Iceland. And last night, London's tree glowed for the first time. Decorated with scores of fairy lights and laden with artificial snow, it was officially handed over to the people of London. The biggest, fastest and latest ship in the Royal Navy sailed down the Clyde this week on her trials at sea. She is the aircraft carrier Eagle, the 21st of her name to serve in the Royal Navy. To report on the voyage of this huge floating airfield comes our air correspondent, Charles Gardner.
Well, Eagle is not only the Navy's newest ship, but also the most secret one. We do know that she is the first carrier built to handle all types of naval jet aircraft. But all Captain Willoughby, her commanding officer, would tell us of her performance was that she handled magnificently. Her exact speed, somewhere over 30 knots, is secret, and that's why no detailed film could be taken of her curving wake as she turned under full helm. Down below there are 2 hangars, which, so we were told, could accommodate nearly 300 double-decker buses. In her engine room, the secrecy tag applies again to much of the machinery. Machinery that pushed Eagle through a 50-knot gale so smoothly that at times we didn't realize we were moving at all. Among what the Navy calls amenities is a civilian-like barber shop. It's staffed by 3 naffy barbers, and with 2,000 heads to trim, they're always busy. Luxurious too in their comfort are the carrier's galleys. The cook's labor-saving devices range from sausage machines to cake ovens. For the ship's company, messing is on the help-yourself system. All meals are taken in 2 huge dining halls, and more than 600 can be served at any one time. The big point about Eagle is that in her are built the lessons of the war. She is the most formidable of our carriers and the safest. The jet pilots will welcome her clear, unobstructed deck and the comforting width of her runway.
Wembley, where television's outside broadcast department puts a new camera unit through its tests. Its main feature is that the camera can largely be operated from inside this mobile control van by remote control. It only needs a push on the button at the main switchboard to set the camera into action. The turret can be revolved, the camera focused, all without anybody touching it. In fact, it's a step towards doing away with the cameraman. But that's only likely to happen when the space is so restricted that there's no room for him. Though the design is new, the camera will give much the same picture as all other outside broadcast cameras now in use. Made in Cambridge, it will go into action for the first time later tonight, Wednesday, at the snooker tournament at Leicester Square Hall. Marylebone Station, where British Railways go on show with something new in flying squads. These have been formed to maintain the permanent track and are equipped with the latest in mechanical aids. Among their equipment is an automatic ballast cleaner. Operated by one man, its purpose is to excavate the old dirty ballast from under the track and return it a few seconds later, all cleaned up. On show too is a track-laying machine. This does the work of 30 men, doing so by laying down new track in pre-assembled sections of up to 60 feet long. In this way, a mile-long railway line can be taken up and relaid inside 6 hours. With 52,000 miles of track to be looked after throughout Britain, British Railways have to renew something like 2,000 miles every year. And that's where mechanical aids like this come in useful.
Television newsreel cameras, before covering the election, went to Frith Street in London, where the man who made television itself possible was honoured this week. It was here that the late John Logie Baird carried out the experiments that gave the world true television. And on this day, 25 years after his flickering pictures were first seen, his best epitaph comes from the millions throughout Britain now viewing this television newsreel. Among those crowding this Soho street to watch the ceremony was Mr. Bill Tainton, who, as Baird's office boy, was the first living subject to be televised. He heard Sir Robert Rennick, president of the Television Society, say this about Baird.
Although this memorial plaque stands in the heart of London, his real memorial is in the forest of aerials that are springing up over the whole country. When next we look at one of these forests, we will remember John Logie Baird, the man who first showed television. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege and my honor to unveil the memorial plaque.
And so, in a back street in London's West End, there is commemorated television's pioneer, John Logie Baird.